These are the contents. As we know, Singapore is facing an increasing aging population. Statistics have shown that elderly aged 65 and above had increased from 7.7% in the year 2001 to 11.1% in the year 2012. Without adequate efforts to address this issue, there could be increasing limitations in the functional mobility of the elderly, leading to a loss of independence in their daily activities. Why? This is because older adults are at risk of disability as their muscle strength declines at a rate of 15% per decade until their mobility is impaired. However, the process of aging does not mean that elderly will only get weaker. Interestingly, it is found that better functional fitness in the elderly can lead to greater muscle strength with gains in lean muscle mass. Hence, this may suggest that if an elderly is fit, the physiological aging process on his or her muscle strength may be slowed down. With changes in fitness and strength in the aging population, the chain effect linking aging, functional mobility, and independence, as shown on the screen, will vary accordingly. Therefore, we will need practical and reliable measures that are specific to functional mobility in order to identify these elderly who are at risk of loss of independence. Adapted from Brickley and Jones in 1999, functional mobility is defined as having the ability to perform normal ambulatory activities safely and independently without undue fatigue. Functional mobility is most commonly measured by the time up and go test, in short, TUG. And this relationship is shown in a study to have a significant p-value of less than 0.0001. It is assumed that one will have good lower limb muscle strength if he or she performs well in a TUG test. Clinically, TUG has been found to be a predictor of general health, difficulty in ADLs, and risk of falls. Additionally, Herman et al. In 2010 concluded that TUG is sensitive to early changes in functional status. As such, our study have identified TUG as a measure of functional mobility. On top of the TUG test being a measure of functional mobility, in recent years, hand grip strength has also been found to be a good predictor of functional mobility due to its ease of use and simplicity to administer. As mentioned earlier, strength is an area of interest in the aging population. Studies have shown that grip strength is strongly correlated with low limb muscle strength, and mobility limitation. On the contrary, hand grip strength measurement reflects upper limb strength, while TUG test measures lower limb strength. From semi and roll study in 2012, there are differences in rate of decline in upper limb and lower limb muscle strength, as shown by the findings: 14% for hand grip strength and 27% for hip adductors. This aroused our interest in whether hand grip strength and TUG test measures a similar construct of functional mobility, despite the differences in the rate of decline. Moreover, to the best of our knowledge, no previous study has directly examined the correlation between hand grip strength and the TUG test. Up to date, only one study used a moderate correlation between hand grip strength and overall strength with an R value of 0.428 and a moderate and inverse correlation between overall strength and TUG with R value of negative 0.464 to conclude the relationship between hand grip strength and TUG. Thus, with all the research knowledge as mentioned, our primary aim is to determine the correlation between hand grip strength and the TUG test. The H0 is that there is no correlation between hand grip strength and TUG, while H1 is that there is a correlation. Next, fitness is another area of interest in the aging population. To the best of our knowledge, up to date, no study had investigated the influence of fitness status of the elderly on functional mobility. Collins and colleagues in 2004 found that age is not a true reflection of one's functional fitness, and that fitness is predictive of one's ability to perform necessary everyday activities needed to maintain independence. This may suggest that age is not the only variable in determining an elderly person's ability to perform ADLs independently. Hence, if our null hypothesis is rejected, our study will move on to the secondary aim to determine if the correlation between hand grip strength and TUG still holds true across all the fitness levels of the elderly. Moving on to the methods of our study. Firstly, subjects recruited in this study were elderly residents of a nursing home and daycare center, and also community-dwelling adults in Singapore. These are our inclusion and exclusion criteria. 109 individuals were randomly selected. Subsequently, 76 subjects were chosen based on the evaluation obtained via the participant information sheet and the medical history questionnaire. A total of 8 tests were carried out. For time efficiency, subjects were allocated into 2 stations. After they were done with their respective stations, they moved on to complete the remaining tests in the other station. During the study, 7 subjects were eliminated, 2 due to decreased cooperation and 5 due to physical pain in the limbs. The final sample size used was 69. The procedures took approximately 45 minutes for each subject. Next, I'll hand over the time to Tian Xing to continue to further elaborate on our study.
Thank you, Wen Tian. Now I will talk about the measures used in our study. Static hand grip strength was measured using a JAMA handheld dynamometer, a commonly used tool. Our study reported a high inter-tester reliability, which is in line with the findings from other studies. Secondly, the tuck test was used to measure walking ability and fall risk. Again, our study showed a high inter-tester reliability, which is in agreement with studies concluding that tuck is valid and reliable. Thirdly, the 6 components of SFT, namely chair stand, chair sit and reach, arm curl, 8 foot up and go, back scratch, and 2-minute step were used to measure fitness of the elderly. The areas that have been assessed are aerobic endurance, upper and lower body strength and flexibility, agility, and dynamic balance. The SFT is a well-established functional fitness assessment for the elderly population, according to Wrigley and Jones in 2001. In the statistical analysis, we used the SPSS version 18. Both the hand grip strength and the tuck test were found to be normally distributed. Next, the Pearson's correlation was used to determine the correlation between hand grip strength and tuck test. We considered the data to be statistically significant if the p-value was less than 0.05. After which, we used the Z transformation formula on the SFT raw scores to create a SFT total score, SFTT, which will be further elaborated in the next slide. Subsequently, regression analysis was used to determine which of the 4 independent variables are important predictors of either hand grip strength or tuck. As mentioned earlier, the 6 tests of SFT measure 6 different components separately. However, we wanted to generate an overall fitness level for the elderly. Therefore, we applied the Z transformation formula to the SFT raw scores. The overall score obtained was named SFTT, which stands for Senior Fitness Test Total Scores. After which, all the subscores of each SFT component was summed up. Finally, an addition of 10 to the total subscores was done in order to create a range of positive scores for easy clinical interpretation. From the Pearson's correlation test, we found a statistically significant correlation between hand grip strength and tuck. However, the R value of negative 0.348 indicates a weak and inverse correlation between the 2 variables. Hence, our group noted a clinical irrelevance to further determine our secondary aim. We then moved on to investigate the influence of the possible confounding factors on hand grip strength. For the 4 independent variables as shown, gender and environment were given numerical codes. Environment encompasses nursing home, daycare center, and community. In our study, we define environment as the amount of activity and motivation offered by the available facilities and human resources in the surroundings. In our analysis, linear regression was done to explore the possible confounding factors as shown on the screen to tuck test and hand grip respectively. The findings show that hand grip strength decreases with increasing age. Interestingly, in contrast to the impact of physiological aging on muscle strength, the correlation was found to be weak and insignificant, with a R value of negative 0.083 and a p-value of more than 0.05. The insignificance of age is further emphasized by a small R-squared value that explains age accounts for only 0.7% of hand grip strength. A possible reason for this correlation, as supported by another study, is the substantial use of the hands in almost all daily activities. The extensive use of the hands was postulated to be sufficient in slowing down the rate of decline of hand grip strength. Moving on with the results, we found a statistically significant relationship between grip strength and gender, fitness, and environment as shown by a p-value of less than 0.05. Multiple regression analysis was done. In line with the findings from our linear regression analysis, age is not a significant predictor of hand grip strength. Analyzed against hand grip strength, the R-square value of fitness, gender, and environment is 0.582. This means that these three variables explain close to 60% of the differences in hand grip strength. Moving on to discussion, our primary finding is that hand grip strength has a weak and adverse correlation with the tuck test, as shown by our results of R equals to negative 0.348. This suggests that hand grip strength should not be the sole measure of functional mobility. As such, both tests should not be used interchangeably, and it is recommended that both tests are necessary for an accurate assessment of an elderly's functional mobility. The limitations of this study are firstly, the exclusion of the effects of assistive devices in the calculation of the SFTT scores, and the small sample size that is not a good representation of the overall elderly population. With that, other areas of improvement are to consider the following as shown on the screen. In conclusion, although previous studies found hand grip strength to be a substitute measure of the tuck test in predicting functional mobility, we postulated that both measures should be done in order to gather a comprehensive assessment given the weak correlation. The non-uniform rate of decline of muscle strength in the upper and lower limbs may further contribute to the weak correlation. Of critical interest is that environment, gender, and fitness appear to be important contributing factors to hand grip strength, which could be further investigated in future research. All in all, our study may provide benefits to the society and can humbly contribute to future research. Finally, we would like to acknowledge the contributions of the following people to our project. With that, I've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you.